The word noble was used before about the work that reporters do. I've never really I've not thought about it that way, but it really can be a noble profession to, by God, get the truth out in an accurate and fair and compassionate way, and to be a member of that, to be called. It's right. It is. In the hands of responsible people, it is and can be a noble profession. I want to thank the Chancellor.
Thank you.
Couldn't be more pleased than to... I'll sit down and shut up. On to the right.
You know, history has a way of putting you, and all of us, in situations that we wonder about later on. Here's a man who's interviewed kings and world leaders and almost a lot of people who are really hard interviews to get, and a lot of people who wish they weren't interviewed by Mike Wallace. And I drew the lucky straw to be able to interview him here today for the benefit of this audience.
Well, don't feel any necessity of getting nasty with me.
Speaking of that, Mike, you know, the Chancellor happened to reference the kind of reputation that precedes you in interviews. And here's my question to you. You look at this guy...
What is your question, Professor?
Here's this guy.
I didn't know him as a professor. I knew him as a hell of a good reporter on Channel 2 and Channel 4.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Here's a man with a ready smile, and you encounter him anywhere. He is such a friendly person. So my question, Mike, is how did you get to be the guy that makes people squirm and have this reputation as the Grand Inquisitor? I mean, how did that happen?
You know something? Certain people have anchor faces, anchor personalities. Not me. The kind of person that you want to be with, that you want to listen to the news. I don't have that kind of nature to begin with. I've always been nosy and always been a trifle irreverent and occasionally abrasive and or confrontational. And so what I decided to do was to make a virtue of necessity and carve out a little piece of the journalistic territory by doing the sort of thing that I do. And what it amounts to is simply this. Research, study, writing out questions, a lot of them ahead of time, learning as much as I can about the people that I interview, what they've said in the past, what has been said about them, and so forth, so that when I sit down, say you're an interviewee, when I sit down with them, they become co-conspirators. They know that I know a great deal about them from what I've read and seen and talked to people about. And they respect, the interviewee respects that. And they say, hey, this I've got to play straight with this reporter because he knows a lot about me, and I'm going to... So we become... what I try to do is to establish a chemistry of confidentiality in which... David?
Yes, Mike.
I have learned something about you.
Okay.
All right, I'll leave it there. Look, but when I say something of that nature, it's because I know something about you, and I want you, the interviewee, to begin thinking about that. Look, well, I wonder what he's got in mind. Right. In any case, I don't want to go on and on about it. It is preparation. It is a noble profession, can be a noble profession. It is a fascinating way to make a living. I can't think of a more can you imagine to have the opportunity to travel, and 37 years on 60 Minutes, to travel any place in the world, to get almost anybody, because we don't have powers of subpoena, to persuade almost anybody, high and low, to talk to us, because we have the opportunity to have millions, it used to be tens of millions, of Americans watching on Sunday nights. Anyway.
Mike, you mentioned about not having the anchor face. And, I wanted to raise something. So many of the young people today, the students who are interested certainly in going to television, they immediately say, you ask them what do they want to be, what do they want to do, they say, I want to be an anchor. And a lot of times, not even I want to be a reporter and then get to be an anchor, I just want to be an anchor. I wonder if you could give them some sense of the virtues and the joys of actually being a reporter as opposed to just being an anchor.
The best anchors have been reporters. Look, Peter Jennings, the late Peter Jennings, I don't think he had finished college when he first got the job as the anchor of ABC News. All of a sudden. Good-looking guy. His father had been in the business. Very capable. I don't think he had graduated from college. He had not been what he did eventually, and it didn't take long, he said, hey, I don't belong here as an anchor. I'm going to quit, and I'm going to go out and report. Peter went from there to the Middle East. He became one of the best reporters, certainly the best reporter in television in the Middle East. And he spent years doing that. When he came back from that reportorial tour of years, when he came back, he was ready. And anchors, by and large, same with Brokaw, same with Rather. Dan Rather made his reputation
Dallas, huh?
in Dallas, Texas, exactly right. He was Rather was such a reporter. Anchors, fine, sure. They're well paid, and they're good looking. Women like them. But reporting is where it begins, and believe me, unless you've been a reporter, you're not going to be a very good anchor.
Speaking about reporting, you of course are familiar as I, because I was at CBS myself for 12 years, that a lot of fallout from what happened on the story that was done regarding the National Guard service of President Bush, and which rocked a lot of the business, not just CBS. And one of the people who was a key player in that was a woman, Mary Mapes, who was a producer. Recently came out and wrote a book, and essentially she's claiming that, well, she was a fall woman, not a fall guy, a fall gal for the whole operation, and that she really didn't do anything wrong. To the extent that you're familiar with her role and what the problem was with that reporting, what was the problem with that reporting?
I don't pretend to know everything that went on, but the problem with that reporting was that not just she and the people above her, you can't blame. She was one of the first people to find out the truth about Abu Ghraib, the prison over in Iraq, and some of the awful things that happened in that prison, and the pictures that we have all seen about that. She had a hell of a reputation. I never met her during the years that she was at CBS. She was always out reporting and traveling and so forth. What was wrong with that 60 Minutes 2 piece was that she hadn't absolutely nailed the fact that these documents that were seen to prove that the President of the United States, current President of the United States, had in the past failed to be dead honest about his service. And because he had not gone to Vietnam, for instance, when he might have, and because he had never really engaged, as far as I know, in combat, he was vulnerable to some bad reporting. And if there's one thing that you gotta be damn careful, damn sure, that when you put something on the air, that you can stand behind every word, every picture, the accuracy, and the fairness of everything that you put on the air. And it turned out that they couldn't, that she couldn't, but it wasn't just she. President of CBS News, Vice President of CBS News, Dan, etc., etc. It was, you know.
Is there too much pressure, Mike, to these days, as compared to, let's say, maybe even 20 years ago, to get it out there, to hit the home run with a story, to make the big splash, to get the ratings? Is that too much part of the problem?
I don't think that it's no. In Vietnam, where we lost 58,000 American young men and women, there was huge pressure. It's a question of, to come back to what I was saying, if you are a reporter, and if indeed it is a noble profession, you make damn sure that what you are telling the American people is, by God, you'll take responsibility for it. And apparently it was not what it purported to be. I don't know about all of the reporting that went into it, but what I do know is that CBS News failed. There was a lot of failing that went on, and they finally had to acknowledge that it was not what it purported to be.
It's a tough thing for them to do, but they did do it. Yeah.
It took them a long time, too long.
Yeah. One person that you haven't interviewed, I believe, is George W. Bush.
That's right.
Is there any particular reason for that?
But he doesn't like me.
Now, I wonder, why would that be?
I can't imagine. Can you? No, the fact of the matter is, Karl Rove, and I guess everybody here knows who Karl Rove is.
We hope so, if they're going to go into journalism.
That's correct. Karl Rove, when George W. Bush was governor of the state of Texas, I went down there to do a story about tort reform. And I was told by Mr. Rove, who told Mr. Wallace, that the governor of Texas, who I wanted to talk to, was not going to talk to me, because he was sure that I and my team had our minds made up, and that it was not something that he wanted the governor, who he already thought should be president, to talk. So he wouldn't let him talk to me. We went ahead, did the piece. It was a first-rate piece, but the governor did not talk to us. Okay. when he came to Washington, I figured, well, that's in the past. So I asked Mr. Rove again, when do I get to talk to the president? Listen, I have talked, pardon me.
Sure.
I have talked to every president since Abe Lincoln. And Morley Safer says I've talked to every first lady since Martha Washington. And it's not. I have, to this day, not only not interviewed, I have never even met the President of the United States because Mr. Rove has stood in the way. I have no idea why. I mean, seriously.
You think they're afraid? Afraid of Mike Wallace? Is that?
They don't like the press. It's worse than that. They don't trust the press. And they feel that maybe my attitude would be insufficiently deferential to the, come on. You are one is deferential to the office of President of the United States. Pardon me. Don't tell me to take water if that was going to. I'm sorry about this. If you could find out, Professor.
Deferential to the office, but not necessarily to the man.
Say again?
That one would want to be deferential to the office,
yeah,
but that doesn't mean to be deferential to the occupier of the office as a person.
Tell me something. A question that I would ask this president. What prepares a president of the United States, what prepares him to be the chief executive officer, if you will, of the biggest superpower in the world? What should be the training for a man who runs for that office? Well, you chuckle, but you understand exactly what I'm saying. He was named Bush. That's good preparation. Actually, his dad was well prepared to be president of the United States. At least he'd run the CIA. He had traveled every place. He'd been ambassador, lived in China. He'd been an ambassador. The current president, I'm not surprised really that his poll ratings are down to 37%. 37%, come on.
It's very low.
I'm not surprised at all. Things are tough for him. Iraq is tough. What to do? You know something? I was surprised, and I would want to ask him about this. When the United States launched the attack upon Iraq, it was announced as shock and awe. The United States of America would use that phrase, going after a country over shock and awe. What the heck does that have to do with America? And there is a certain, in my estimation, a certain arrogance in the way that we're going to go out there and we're going to bring democracy to the world. Anyway, enough.
You mentioned that President Bush and perhaps the people immediately around him, that he doesn't and they don't like the press. It happens to be in a time, Mike, though, when a lot of Americans, according to certain surveys, also don't like the press, certainly as much as they used to in the era of Watergate, for example, where the press was generally ranked in these surveys that they do of occupations close to Supreme Court justice. Now, I think the latest has us ranked below congressmen. And that's not very high in that Why do you think that is, and what can be done about that? Because that's...
You mean
that's
about the low rating of the press
yes,
for the
by
American
people? Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, we've not been hearing a lot of good news, have we?
No, not lately.
Okay. And we are the messengers.
Off with their heads.
May I?
Sure. That's who it's here for.
Please tell me. Raise your hand. Do you read... No, forgive me. Do you trust the press? You people? Those who do, raise your hand. Mm-hmm. Well, it's far from unanimous. I'd love to be able to say to you, why don't you? What is it about the press that you don't trust? Are we biased? We are? Not always. Look, we are constantly taking a look at all kinds of institutions, all kinds of individuals. Now, a lot of people are taking a look at us and saying, why should we trust you? Do you have your mind already made up? There's a lot of bias in the press. And you know who helps to do that? a lot of people Rush Limbaugh. You know, he spreads the message that the press is not to be trusted. A lot of Sean Hannity. Come on.
All right. I think it's the weight of the medallion.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
What's that?
Sure. We'll do some questions with the audience. But,
Oh, absolutely.
if you'd like to finish that thought?
No. Do I want to finish that thought? It's an easy lick for people who are unhappy with what they're learning from the press to say, hey, the press can't be trusted. And a lot of people pay a lot of attention. There's certain people in talk radio, for instance, cable television, for instance, where it isn't news reporting, it is, to a certain degree, news shouting, and it's enough for now.
Okay. Okay, opportunity to ask a question of Mike Wallace. A lot of people would give a lot of money to be able to do that. You can do it for free. Yes, miss. Thank you. Stand up, please. And speak up so that we can hear.
Mr. Wallace, do you feel that the press is sugarcoating the anti-war movement and failing to depict the...
I'm having a little difficulty. I'm a little deaf, so you're going to have to do it louder.
There's a microphone right here. Yeah. And if those of you who might want to ask a question after her, if you would go to a mic,
please. Mr. Wallace, do you feel that the press has sugarcoated the anti-war movement, failed to report on the urgency of it? It appears that the way it's reported in the mainstream media makes a million people in Washington look like a picnic on the park. Would you like to comment? Thank you.
Has the media, has the press sugar-coated?
Downplaying, is that what she's suggesting? Downplaying the anti-war?
Downplaying the urgency of the anti-war movement in the United States and in the world.
Not what I watch, not what I listen to. Am I wrong, Professor?
Well, I think there's a case that can be made that it's a very controversial issue that in many media are a little bit shy, gun shy. You know, the whole issue now becomes if you criticize the war,
You're not a patriot.
patriot. And that old game. There's a film out now about your old colleague and his battle with McCarthy. And that issue was very prevalent then. So to some extent, that may be in play as well. It may be an inhibiting factor.
That's an interesting point. If you criticize the war and the fact that we got into the war and that we shouldn't be there to begin with, then you're unpatriotic. There's a 6-letter word for that. It is simply most reporters that I know are every bit as much patriots, every bit as much patriots as anybody else in the right wing. They care. We care deeply about this country. One of the reasons that we have taken the job is because we care so much about what we have and the freedoms that we have and the freedoms that we want to continue to have. And this is a profession. This is a calling. That's why a lot of people become reporters because they want the opportunity to tell the truth to the people of America. And a lot of reporters start with low salaries and in tough jobs just because of that
passion.
That passion, exactly.
Young lady on this mic, please.
This is in regard to your question you posed to the audience. When you asked the question, do we trust the press, I would like to know what press are you talking about? Is it the American press or do you mean the international press? For I do believe both are completely different, like night and day, as far as reporting news on TV.
You know, I shouldn't do this damn thing because of my hearing. Would you please?
Okay. She's asking when you were referring to the question, when you asked them, do you trust the press? She wanted to know, were you referring to the American press or to all of the press, including the international press, or were you specifically speaking
I'm talking about, for now anyway, I'm talking about the American press. Look, you cannot trust the press in a dictatorship. You can't. You can't trust the Chinese press. We couldn't trust the Soviet press during the Cold War. And they could say, well, we can't trust the American press. It depends upon your perception. It depends upon the kind of government under which you live.
Over here.
Hi, Mr. Wallace. My name is Li Jing. I'm Chinese.
What'd you say?
She's Ling, and she's Chinese.
I agree with you that different countries media has different focus. Like in China, we report a lot of good news, versus America report a lot of bad news. That's very interesting. My dream is to become a good journalist in America, to communicate between the two most powerful countries. So my question is that, looking back 60 years ago,
60 years ago. Looking back 60 years ago, yeah.
Have you ever thought you could make it like what you have done today?
Did you think back then that you would have made it to the degree you have today?
No.
Become the man you are today?
No, I certainly didn't. All I wanted to be, really. I graduated from the University of Michigan in 1939. And you know what I wanted to be? I wanted to be a radio announcer. That's what I wanted to be. Rip and read, perhaps, the news. But what it never occurred to me about being a reporter. And then I wanted to read newscasts, and did. We'd rip off the wire and read it into the microphone and so forth. Then I spent some time in the Navy, about 3 years. And the more time I spent, and the more I traveled, and I traveled over a fair amount of the out in the Pacific, particularly, and all through there. And I began to think, I don't want to keep just reading other people's words. I want to do something that I'm proud of, that I'm dedicated to. And so little by little, and it took me a little time to find my way, because I had done all kinds of things, honest work, but not, I was an actor, and I was read commercials and things like that. And then I finally discovered, hey, I have enough money now, for a while, to take a year and find a job as a reporter, just as a reporter. And all of a sudden, suddenly I realized a whole new world. And since that time, I can't imagine a more satisfying job than that of being a reporter.
I second the motion.
So what would you say the three?
I'm sorry, one question, because there's a lot of people lined up. To this young man on this side over here,
Can I
please.
finish?
We have, Miss, I'm sorry, but we do have to get on, and there are a lot of people waiting
Thank
to
you.
ask a question. Yes, please, go ahead.
All right.
Mr. Wallace, do you think the level of TV journalism has gone downhill, or especially with biased channels such as, biased TV shows such as,
TV journalism going downhill, in particular with channels like what, Fox?
Yes, Fox.
Okay, all right. Channels like Fox. Fox News.
You expect me to say that channels like Fox? My son does Fox News Sunday.
That's Chris Wallace.
And it is... What do you got against Fox? Oh, he's retreated.
Yeah, he's retreated. Off the hook there.
He's the messenger, and he's made a statement, and he's... Look, there's an appetite for a different kind of coverage. Fox, run by a man by the name of Roger Ailes, an old friend of mine, and he understood that there was a yearning out there in the public for something that is different from what was perceived to be the liberal, predictable line of the mainstream press. So we're going to be fair and balanced, etc., etc. It was a commercial decision, but not just a commercial decision. He felt that a lot of people in America were not getting the kind of news from the kind of reporters who might have a different take. Well,
they're doing well. They're doing well with it financially.
They certainly are. They are doing well, and they're responding to Dean.
He's no response to this. Okay. Next question.
Good day, Mr. Wallace.
Yeah.
And Mr. Diaz. In regards to what you said about journalism being biased, you said it depends on country, but in my school I was told that it might also depend on culture. In America, much of the news media is covering entertainment and non-political, non-social issues. So what can we do to make the public take the media more seriously, and what can the media be doing to make itself more serious?
What can we do to make the people appreciate the media as being more serious, to see it as more serious? And what can be done to make the media more serious? He says, in a culture which pays so much attention to entertainment and similar kind of soft news.
If I could solve that, I would. It's a big problem. Infotainment. Look, there used to be, when I was growing up, there used to be 3 networks: ABC, CBS, NBC. And at 6:30 at night, everybody in America watched one of the 3 networks, and basically they got the same kind of news. Now, there are 300. With cable and one thing and another, there are so many ways to get news. As a result of which, how do we get people to pay attention to we need the circulation, because with circulation comes money. comes advertising, as a result of which infotainment has become too much of the kind of news that we get today. Infotainment, tabloid, hype, not just plain serious news. Cronkite, Walter Cronkite, Huntley Brinkley, Howard K. Smith. Back in those days, I'm quite serious about this. 7 out of 10 Americans were watching the evening news, and it was damn good coverage of the news. There isn't anything like that anymore. So much of it, as I say, is infotainment. Either either it is celebrity news, or it's tabloid hype news, and the reason is the suits who pay my salary. The suits are they're after circulation, and they really want us to get a lot of eyes and a lot of ears listening to the news.
Get them into that tent. But at the same time, it should be said that all the more reason to marvel at the continuing success of a show like 60 Minutes.
That's true.
It does get down to the nitty-gritty and gets into serious issues and gets in people's faces. So we're lucky to have it. Yes, the young lady on this side.
Good afternoon, Professor Diaz and Mr. Wallace. My name is Desiree Addison, and I'm the host and producer of a cable access show on BCAT called Culture Club TV. I cover emerging artists that don't get visibility on mainstream TV, except for maybe PBS.
My question, a cable access show that
you do?
Yes, I'm a producer. My question is, you asked, do people trust the press? It depends on the source. Shows like Democracy Now!, who bring, the real news to the people, and Now on PBS are most trusted resources, those type of journalists. My question specifically is, was there ever an instance, because of so much corporate ownership of the news, in your
there ever an instance because of so much corporate ownership in the news? Go ahead, I'm just saying.
I appreciate that. Were you ever in a situation where you had to put your foot down as a journalist and say, to the suits, I won't report this, or...
Did you ever have to put your foot down and confront the suits or tell the suits that, no, we're not going to do it that way, it has to be done this way?
Of course. Of course.
Could you tell us the instance?
Look, if you are a serious reporter and if you are in a noble profession, and your boss begins to tell you, he can do it once, he can do it twice, but if he really figures that he's going to tell you how to cover the news, I'm not saying that the top editor, but if it's because of commercial reasons or for reasons of not offending somebody that you can't tell this story, you're damn right. You either threaten to quit, and that has happened with me, or you quit.
Or you get fired.
Over what story did you threaten to quit? Can you tell us?
Okay.
I'm only one question.
Thank you. Yes, on this side, please.
When you're conducting an interview with someone who's either being misleading or uncooperative, is it more important to keep pressing and have the interview ended, like potentially, or is it better to keep with kind of soft questions to keep the interview going?
This is about your strategy when you're dealing with someone who seems to be evasive or trying to be misrepresenting facts. He's asking whether or not it's better to kind of tone it down to keep them talking, or really get in their face and risk the possibility that they'll end the interview and get up and walk out. What do you say?
The latter. I mean, if you think that somebody is really not telling you the truth, then say, hey, prove it. What is the evidence for this answer that you're giving me? That's not what I have. I know a fair amount about you. I know a fair amount about your background. What? On the basis of what are you making these charges? Whatever. I mean, you got to... there's a difference between interviewing and just reporting. We are reporters when we are interviewers, but look, if you've done your homework and you're damn sure of the question, of the validity of the question that you're asking, then you...
And I think it goes back to something Mike said early on. Preparation, preparation, preparation.
Correct.
Do the homework, know the stuff. Yes, sir, on that side.
Hi. I just wanted to ask you, what do you think about the way Americans in general, corporate government and journalism, how they tend to project the values, American values, to the world and tend to think that this is the way, this is the correct way, and how that we're supposed to be correcting the world's ills, and we assume with arrogance that this is supposed to be correct, that Americans are supposed to be the world police?
The question, I think, is what is your assessment of the way American values are projected, not only by the government and the corporate sector, but by the press, the projection of American values to the rest of the world?
Well, it depends. A lot of the rest of the world sees American values as materialism, permissiveness. We are not regarded as a particular, we are a material society, we are soft, permissive, fat, happy, arrogant, etc. For a lot of the rest of the world, whether you people feel that way, that we are that way, whether you feel that way, but a lot of the rest of the world, why do you think that our reputation, why do you believe that our reputation is so bad in so much of the world today? When I grew up, to be an American and to be part of the American scene and to be part of the American press, and when I say when I grew up, until not very long ago, we were admired for what people wanted to come here to share in the American dream. Sure, they wanted to make a buck, but basically they loved or yearned for something like America for themselves. I don't think that's true anymore.
Why? Why is that not true anymore?
He's asking why it's not true anymore. If you can answer that briefly so we can move on, okay? Because you did kind of get in a second question, and it's not fair to the rest. Okay.
Because so much of the world, one reason is that they know damn well that there was no good reason for us to get involved in Iraq as we have. That's one big reason in a lot of the world.
I know some of you will wind up being disappointed because we've only got about 5 minutes left. So I'm asking those of you who are asking questions to please avoid a preamble and get right to your question.
Okay. You referenced, in reference to something you mentioned earlier, how do you feel is the best way to approach a story in which the top official involved fails to comment?
How is the best way to approach a story, Mike, where the top official involved refuses to comment?
And you say that this man refuses to comment. Here, and I have done this for a long time. Here are the charges. These are the questions that I want to ask. He refuses to answer. I wonder why. It's a perfectly sensible way to tell the story.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, miss, on that side.
Hi. I just graduated from journalism. I'm Puerto Rican, and I just came here July. And I want to pursue my master's degree in journalism. But the thing is that I really...
What's the question, please?
It's hard for me to know what's out there for me because every door that I knock, it's closed.
What's out there for her? She wants to pursue journalism. She's soon to graduate.
And I already graduated.
And she's already graduated. What do you think her opportunities are?
No job.
She doesn't have a job. I'm not sure Mike has a job for you, but what
I know.
advice?
I'm not
What
asking
advice?
for one. It's just that
Persist.
to
If
be
you care,
occupied.
If you care enough about it, persist. Persist. You'll get a job. If you care deeply enough and you impress that sufficiently upon potential employers, and they'll talk to you, And if you have the bona fides to say, listen, I want a job. I admire this paper or radio station, or persist. It takes time to get a job.
Mike Wallace auditioned for a job at one point and was turned down. Imagine how bad whoever did that felt years later. Right? Yes, miss, over there.
I'm really curious to hear your comments on the FCC and the issue of freedom of speech with celebrities like Howard Stern, and that's just one of them.
Okay, how do you feel about the FCC regarding the issue of free speech? Apparently them fining people for saying certain things on the air. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission.
What about it?
About what she's suggesting is their stance on freedom of speech relative to fining people who say certain things on the air, like Howard Stern.
Well, I am not a Howard Stern fan, if that's what you...
He listens to Imus.
Yeah, I do. I do listen to Imus, but no. I'm old-fashioned enough to think that you should... Certain kinds of language... I mean, you know perfectly well that there are certain things that are done and said on the air that are ugly and again, I am not a Howard Stern fan, so...
Okay, we'll leave it at that. We have time for one more question. You're the lucky fellow.
Thank you. Mr. Wallace, I'm sorry, I'm not a good public speaker.
Could you speak a little louder or lift the mic, please?
Mr. Wallace, did you see pre-war intelligence data, and what was your opinion on WMD before the war?
Did you see pre-Iraqi war intelligence data and your opinion about the whole business of the alleged weapons of mass destruction in Iraq?
And the question is, do I think that they were there?
Yeah, and did you see any intelligence regarding to that?
Well, we all saw a certain amount of intelligence on that score. We don't. There are congressional committees that are trying to make up their minds, yes, still, about whether we were propagandized as the American people, propagandized by people who wanted to go to Iraq. As far as I'm concerned, there was no doubt about what Al-Qaeda was doing. Afghanistan would have been just fine for Afghanistan would have been an understandable war. I don't believe that it was ever proven to me that there was an imminent threat of something awful happening at the hands of Iraq. What was Saddam? He was a brute. We should have been able to get him out of there without shock and awe, and without a plan, for Pete's sake, for something that was going to happen after we went in. I still don't think, myself, I'm still not persuaded that anybody had thought through sufficiently what we were going to do, what kind of an exit strategy we were going to... When was that war going to be won? Was there going to be a surrender? There was not that plan. There was not that savvy, in my estimation, with Mr. Cheney and Mr. Bush and Mr. Rumsfeld, etc., etc.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have.
I apologize for not being able to hear better.
Let's have a big hand for Mike Wallace!